Sikhs from around the world by showcasing their professions, passions, and perspectives. I'm your host, Mandheer Singh, aka the Nihung. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa,
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Charanpreet Singh, welcome to the Nihung's Arena.
All right.
I'm really excited to talk to you. You have different perspectives on a lot of different things. And sitting here looking at you, one of them popped into my head. You have an interesting theory about the Star Wars Sith and Sikhi.
Oh. I should have known you were going to bring that up. Okay, sure.
Why don't you explain? Because I think for the most part, most people associate the Sikh with the Jedi. That we see a lot of parallels with the Jedi.
Right.
And you have a different theory on this. Well, can you explain that a little bit?
So, I'm a huge Star Wars nerd, I guess you can say. You know,
as am I.
Yep. So basically, culturally, Jedi's 100%, I believe, I see it aligns with Sikh perspectives, Sikh worldview, Gurmat, right? And you can say that the Jedi Ret Maryada, so to speak, or they're called the Jedi Code, right?
Right.
Is not. Because it's about suppressing emotion and detaching yourself completely from the world, just not participating.
Almost like an ascetic.
Right. And that's a sadhu, right? Like the sadhu, and I just remember like Guru Nanak Sahib, the Siddh Gosht, right? His conversations with the sadhus, it just doesn't make sense. Whereas the Sith, their maryada or their code, it's not necessarily their daily actions, right? It recognizes emotions and the place that they have, and also being full-fledged members of society. Their culture and how they do it obviously isn't aligned with Gurmat, but that's where I try to draw a line. I'm like, Sikhs are neither, and they're not in the middle, and that can lead into a lot of other conversations there. But that's where my perspective comes from there.
Interesting. So really, if you were to look at the Force as the binding thing between everything, what you're saying is there's a culture with the Sith that can apply to Sikhi, and then there's a philosophy, maybe not philosophy, but
no, it's the other way around.
Oh yeah, the culture for the Jedi applies with the Sikh, but the philosophy of the Sith applies more with Sikhi. Yeah,
I mean, obviously, I would edit a few things because they're very focused on. So the thing is that, if we look at like the Panch Chor or whatever, right? Yeah. The Sith actually succumb to the Chor, but at least they're playing in the arena.
Okay.
The Jedi, they just try to kill it off completely.
Which is also dangerous. We saw that it was dangerous.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. The movies, the Skywalker saga is a complete example of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, there's obviously tweaks there, but it's not a black and white approach.
Yeah.
Is all I'm trying to say.
I've always applied the Asadivar to Darth Vader, to Anakin Skywalker.
Right.
That you can see that there's this goal in life, and the challenges are the different things that you think you're such a big vadda hova dunidar, you think you're such a hotshot, you think you have all this power, you think you can stop aging, you think you can get so smart, you think you can gain all these things, and in the end, you're just going to die wretched death if you don't connect yourself with Nam, however you want to define what Nam is. But you know what I mean? So I've always kind of tried to do that to get the youth to interact. But now, even with Star Wars is like an old man's game now.
Maybe. You're older than me, but so me, it wasn't really about I actually never liked the movies. I was always a expanded universe type of person because I played the video. Right, that was my generation. Was the video, and to be honest, they explore these topics way more than you can imagine. There's actually there's a game series called Knights of the Old Republic where it's based around you making decisions. So you're put into various scenarios over like 60 to 80 hours. I mean, people can play that game for 150 hours through one playthrough. and there's all sorts of problem situations, and they have you make decisions in every situation, and then they try to classify them as light side or dark side, etc. But for me, because I was so like, hey, I wasn't going, I knew what the Jedi way was, and I knew what the Sith way was. I was just, there's like a meter that showed light and dark side alignment, and I was like,
right in the middle.
Right. I may have leaned a little bit toward light side a lot, but it was just, but the stories in that game were explored, those topics were just way more than the movies did. And that was my generation, what I grew up in.
I see.
Because the movies came out like, what, the 70s or something?
Well, the original movie, it was 77.
Yeah.
And I think it was 77, then 79 or 80, and then 83 were the original movie.
I wasn't born.
Yeah. I was a little kid, and my dad took us. And I remember when we went and saw Return of the Jedi, it was the first movie I've ever been to where there was literally a line outside the theater wrapped around. That was the first experience I had with like something that huge.
Yeah, the anticipation, right? The finale.
Yep. But okay, so got that out of the way.
Right.
But it is a fascinating thing because, I think it's important for us to think about our Sikhi and the things we do. Just because you're in gaming or a movie fan or watching sports or working, making a living, being able to apply Sikhi philosophy to those things or connecting it or seeing the parallels.
It's my wife likes to use the term Gurmat colored lenses. Try to approach everything with that. And I think that in essence for me, that's been a major like teaching from Guru Sahib, just everywhere you go, everything you do, always try to have the lens or at least challenge yourself to think in that way. So.
Yeah, no, that's really important. One thing I remember, I think you mentioned this at the retreat, or maybe I saw you on, because most of my interaction with you is online, but
sure.
I've met you a few times in person, but online I've followed you quite a bit. But there's another thing you brought up that I thought was really interesting. And again, maybe it's just looking at the world from that Gurmat lens. You talked about a Sikh seat at the UN and having Sikh military, like a Air Force, that can respond to certain types of conflict or whatever. How much did you develop that idea? Like, how far can you go with that?
I'd say in my early 20s, mid 20s, I spent a lot more time than I do nowadays.
Yeah.
I was a bit more of, I think it's important to have dreams, and I haven't stopped dreaming, but I haven't spent a lot of my mental resources in that realm of things anymore after my continuing and ongoing experience from 2015 to now.
Yeah.
Sarbat Khalsa and getting really involved in the actual Panth and who's actually out there. It makes you realize a lot of the on the ground realities and where we are as a people.
Meaning it's disheartening.
We're in shambles.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not even close. But I don't want to stop. I think it's important to dream. And I actually feel like I should do more dream exercises internally myself, and also try to encourage it in my, Sangat. But I stopped for quite some time because of the reality. And I started living in the reality and trying to figure out what actually can be done with what we have right now.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that? So you were involved in the Sarbat Khalsa that happened, or I don't know if we want to put quotes around that or not, but
it's in the history books now, whether we can talk about whether it's legitimate or not. It's
it doesn't matter. It's in the history books. So why don't you tell us a little bit? What was your experience of that? What role were you playing? How were you involved? And then what was your experience? What did you see?
So for me, I was 25 when all that happened. So that places my age. I'm 31 now.
Yeah.
When I came in, it came from somebody who'd been obsessed with reading about Sarbat Khalsa and Sikh governance. The methodology, particularly the story of how Nawab Kapoor Singh was chosen in the Sarbat Khalsa of 1728. That had a huge impact on my life. Just that story right there. Obviously Gurbani and, trying to exercise, Naam, however you'd find that, connecting with Guru, right? And Gurmat is through Shabad, right? But the practicality applied in that story, historiography is a huge deal. I believe is the word historiography. It's what they classify as the Janam Sakhis. The stories is a huge deal, especially for our tradition, which these stories are such a huge impact. That one specifically was a huge deal. All right, so the way that story really impacted me was the decision-making process and how we chose our leaders and the idea. So the thing was, is nobody, in the purest sense, nobody was Punjabi ch kende kursi nahi mangde si.
Right.
You know, right? So nobody was trying to get the chair. Nobody was trying to be chodar. Nobody was trying to be on top. That wasn't the idea and the principle behind it. In fact, they found it offensive that you even put the offer to them, or even the concept of a supreme leader or something was so offensive to them.
Right. Like, what you think I'm power hungry? You think I'm, do you think I'm trying to take advantage of people? Why would you put it on me?
Sure. That, but 100% also, we are the Khalsa. We are collectively Guru Panth. No one of us is greater than the other. So how can any one of us lead? Guru Granth Sahib Ji is our leader.
Right.
That has such a profound effect on me, on the mentality at the time, and wanted me to try to forced me to try to understand it a little bit more, especially when I read a little bit, I mean, whatever was left in the books or whatever we can have in what I heard in stories of what the dialogue was back and forth. They're like, well, this doesn't make any sense. We're like, well, we can't conform. They were trying to figure out how they could navigate discussions with the status quo governmental structure of Nawabi and Jageer, and what the Khalsa principles were of governance. And they were basically developing government in that conversation of how he was selected.
Right.
They basically were like, we don't know, take hukum. Right. And they took hukum, and then they based their decision off of what the hukum was, which I don't actually, it doesn't say anywhere. I mean, somebody could probably do the research and try to figure out what shabad it was, but essentially it was that whoever does the most seva should be chief. Right. And then they ended up picking the guy that cleaning up horse crap and cleaning people's kachere and organizing the langar. But the thing is that person ended up being one of the greatest leaders we've ever had. Yeah. And that showed the standard of caliber of individuals at the time.
Yeah. But you know what? Today the problem would be, we'd take a hukamnama and there would be a fight over the interpretation of it.
Oh, 100%. Obviously. I think I don't know. Maybe it's hukum itself that hukum was selected, right? Is the hukum and it's like inception type thing? I don't know. Right. But maybe it wasn't a hukum that could be misinterpreted. Yeah. But it happened. Or maybe Sikhs were so aligned in how they understood Gurbani at the time. But actually, I'd argue against that because they have the fight with the Bandai, because that was actually after. That was after the fight. Mm-hmm. So that Sarbat Khalsa happened after the Bandai Khalsa and the Tat Khalsa. Right. So they still had the same problems and they still argued with the same.
That's true. Maybe it's just a different attitude. I don't know. Even that I'm not sure of, because when you read Panth Prakash, like Ratan Singh Pangu. Now, I only read the English, so I don't. My Punjabi wouldn't be strong enough for me to read it in Punjabi and understand it. I enjoyed.
Most people know.
Yeah, I enjoyed with the Punjabi part, but I wasn't understanding it until I read it in English, and then it made a lot more sense to me what's being said. There's a lot in there that maybe I don't agree with. Maybe a lot of people don't agree with, but one thing that was interesting in there was the idea that all these different clans would meet in the jungle, and they were kind of one-upping each other, like who's the better warrior, or they would come in kind of with a little bravado, like our clan is the best clan, we're the best followers of the Guru, and we're the ones that are going to do the best fighting for the Guru. So there was still clashes, there was still the normal human behavior. Yeah. Right. We have this idea in our head that everybody wore like an orange damalla, blue chola with an orange kamar kasa, and they did jakaras in unison.
Yeah, no.
Not at all. Not at all. Not at all. As a matter of fact, they're even saying that some of the whole Chamkor thing, like the Chali Mukte, thinking, leaving Guru Sahib, it made sense in context when you realize that people thought Guru Gobind Singh had gone insane. Mm-hmm. Right? Then
people thought Guru Hargobind Sahib went insane too.
Yeah. So you can imagine.
Actually, people thought every Guru was insane.
Every Guru was insane at some level.
Think about it.
Guru Nanak Dev Ji throwing pani to the other direction.
Guru Nanak Dev Ji said, forget your family structures. That's the most insane thing you can imagine, right, at the time.
That's true. That's true. But we have this idea that people all just sat and sang kirtan in unison, and they just sat there listening to the guru.
When really, I think this fantasy-eyed approach or starry-eyed look at it is, it really makes you get detached or step away from the current realities.
Right.
But in actuality, this is a common thing.
Right. So now knowing that, when you have that perspective, then you realize that the struggles that we're having, maybe they're exaggerated. Our numbers are bigger. Media, we have the social media, and we can exaggerate them.
Yeah, yeah.
Human problem is the same.
Yeah, it's 100% the same. When I went back and, the reason why I stopped dreaming to an extent for some things, we're not at that. We don't have the resources to do the things that I've dreamed about.
Right.
We're not there. The world just isn't at that. Well, at least we aren't. We lost so many opportunities. We're at a different phase. And that's where you have to kind of take a step back and reevaluate, like, hey, where are we exactly? Yeah. And that 2015 was a wake up call for me to understand where we are exactly. Like,
so how do you define where we are exactly? What do you see?
We're in our infancy.
Okay.
If I'm being 100% honest, we, in terms of individuals that really try to explore these topics, it was so hard to get even the concept of governance structure out there as something that is important. That, if we talk about, like, we live in the United States, we talk about how there's an anti-intellectualism movement or something, or an anti-academic, anti-knowledge,
anti-science.
I'd argue that's been a thing in Punjab since the British came. There's been an anti, if I go right now, so when I came out of college and I try to start being more active in my local Gurdwara back home.
Yeah.
You get the same type of thing.
Right.
Oh, you're just like, what the heck? This is where we are.
Yeah.
That's a different set of issues that I can't exactly place in history. But it has, the issues are kind of the same theme.
Interesting.
That they're there.
We ignore the fact that Bhai Taru Singh was what we would call an intellectual. Baba Deep Singh we remember as the warrior who threw his head into the Prakarma, and he was a master of languages.
Yes.
Right, an intellectual, what we would call an intellectual.
I knew 8 languages.
Yeah, I mean,
so
but what we
Hari
focused.
Singh Nalwa spoke fluent English. That's how.
Is that right?
That's how he was able to go. He's the one who was the proxy on behalf of Maharaja Ranjit Singh at the Satluj for the Treaty of Amritsar.
Yeah, so he's
the one that went. So he had to know English.
Didn't even think about that.
There's no way he couldn't have.
Right.
Why Maharaja Ranjit Singh wasn't very intelligent, educated. He may have had good principles every now and then. His personal Maryada was abysmal.
Right.
But Hari Singh Nalwa was the most intellectual. Actually, oh man, I forgot what his name was. Oh man. Goodness gracious me. Second Anglo-Sikh War. I can't believe I'm phasing out this name. By Maharaj Singh, where he learned, where he went to school.
Okay.
But where he went to school. Maharaj Singh was very intelligent. But the place that he went to school, which is where one of the treasons happened during the first Anglo-Sikh War.
Yeah.
It's like south of Amritsar near Taran Taran. It's still there. And that's where everybody in the Sandhyawala clan, they all met up and stuff. And it was bombarded by the people who were in charge of the Dogras. So that school itself was a highly intellectual school with their leader. I forgot their name. And I know a couple of my mentors will smack me right now. But yeah, so even they were ignored at the time.
Yeah. So there is some kind of anti-intellectual sentiment, right?
Yeah, because it's been growing. And I think it started to grow toward the latter half of the empire, to be honest.
Well, that's also coincides with when a lot of... Today we have a Sant Baba problem, but like when you even look at the Gursikh personalities that came out of the late 1800s, early 1900s, you can talk about, different people like Mandheer Singh or Sant Gurbachan Singh, Sant Kartar Singh, like some of these people that later for Taksal, Baba Harnam Singh, like we genuinely regard them as very Gursikh people, not necessarily people that you could argue whether they started their own cults or datas or groups or whatever, but they were considered Gursikh people. And their value was not based on their intelligence. It was based on some kind of spiritual enlightenment that came only from Gurbani or Simran or whatever. So that feeling that we can't have educational knowledge, we have to have only a spiritual knowledge for it to be valid. And then anybody can have that. Right. So like, I didn't go to school, but I can be really smart about spiritual matters. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up. A lot of people have profiteered off this very specific thing.
Yeah. Especially nowadays. Nowadays, it's way out of hand.
But I guess the people, if people are there, if they made the turn, they'll realize it's all kind of one and the same. It's all kind of one flow, one string, nothing separated. But
No, I mean, even just the idea of information. We live in the age of information now, right? You can go on YouTube and the internet and find whatever you want to find and learn about it and whatever. But people don't think about, like, Guru Gobind Singh's Darbar was a place that Guru Sahib invited all the people that knew everything about a topic to come disseminate that information to the population. Because the general population was only allowed you couldn't do rags under the order of the emperor. If you were a lower caste, you couldn't hear certain prayers, like all these different rules. Those were all controlling information. Guru Gobind Singh said, no, make this come here, write this information, write the books, write
in the common language. Yeah.
In the common language and distribute it. Let people learn, let people know. It makes you wonder, like, what would Guru Sahib do today? Would Guru Sahib have a YouTube channel? Maybe. I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe a wiki page.
but anybody could change a wiki page.
This is true. Like, we'll have like the Taksal wiki page or something. Right? Not Damdami Taksal. Taksal means mint.
Yeah,
it's actually a really cool word.
Yeah. It's been taken over, kind of.
It's been taken over. But. Yeah, I get your point. But in essence, my experience was, trying to navigate an anti-intellectualism movement.
So that was the biggest resistance. Was just
that. And also people were coming in with specific agendas too. So I guess you could say I was coming in with an agenda. I'm not interested. I think it's absolutely important that we set up a governance structure, with or without statehood. Because we are a nation.
So what would that look like? I don't understand.
So, I mean, it's been demonstrated a few times. So we did a couple of case studies. So the Somalian elders have done it. You could argue that the Jews had it. They had the Jewish World Congress for a very long time before Israel. Actually, it still exists today because there's Jews all over the world. So it still has a place.
Yeah, I don't really know a lot about that. So before the Jews got Israel, they had some kind of governing body for all the Jews around the world. With the intent,
it wasn't all. It was kind of like a certain organizations would sign up to be a part of the Jewish World Congress, and then internationally, it was deemed as like, oh, that's a voice of the Jews. But obviously, one Jew in a family somewhere probably will be like, they don't represent me,
of course.
And then
but like you can imagine that with Sikhs being something like you have a Jathedar from your region, and all the Jathedars around the world get together and have a conference.
Sure. So like, Sarbat Khalsa, essentially, if we tried to bring it to some sort of Western terminology to define it in this day and age so people could relate to it. Because regardless whether you like it or not, we were affected by colonialism in Punjab, within Punjab, as well as we're in the diaspora. So the best description we could use that we figured out, in Punjabi, you call it Sarb Sehmati, which is sort of everybody Sehmati, an agreement.
So like a consensus.
Right. That's the word we started using, consensus. Then we're like, consensus-based democracy. That's what we're going to call it. Right. So we started trying to define it like that and arguing the words, and, other people like in Punjab, they started saying things, people we're trying to work with, they call it common minimum program, things like that. Jagmeet Singh and company came from Canada. They went to the World Sikh Conference in Australia with Rajinder Singh Bands and Paul and all these different people who were, outcasts from SGPC and SAD, and even some AAP members like Janelle Singh was there, right? And they started talking. They were doing examples. They were trying to get the idea of this consensus-based thing and all that stuff going forward. But then it turned into arguing about why we boycotted the 1992 election and stuff, and who messed up what. And
oh my God!
So like we have so much baggage. We can't do thought development. And that was the main thing. It's like, okay, all right, maybe we're getting somewhere. We're starting to talk about more in-depth things. Right. Oh wait, there's this thing that isn't addressed. We have so many things that are just not addressed that we're like, well, how can we start talking about this when these are ongoing? I'm like, well, It's only ongoing if the people know about it. Nobody knows everything that happened. If we go ask a lame person about,
they would have no idea.
Yeah, I'd be like, what are you talking about in 1992? What happened in 1992? I'm just be like, man, how do I even start explaining that? In addition, if you talk about the Hari Singh Nalwa conference of July 4th, 1978, right? That was a major conference where the opposition deemed that India had betrayed the Sikhs. Nobody will know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, right? I have no idea what you're talking about.
It's hard for me to get people to read an Anand Prasad resolution.
Yeah, so is that where Anand Prasad resolution came from?
Yeah, so it was a direct result of that conference. Actually, it wasn't 78. It was way earlier than that. I think it was 64 or 65.
Yeah, and they finally got the resolution in 78.
And then resolutions started writing in 65, 66. But then the resolutions didn't really come up until 82.
Right.
Then they started doing something with it. So there's this whole timeline that, to be honest, I kind of gave up trying to talk about, because not everybody's on the same page and not everybody understands the story.
Yeah.
And it really goes back really far. I'd argue the division goes back to the missile period, with the 12th missile, the Fulkian, betraying, and them still staying alive till today, and then them forming PEPSU, and now most of them in the Congress Party. So
I see.
For me telling this story, like I'm just saying all these.
You might as well just start with Guru Nanak Dev Ji was born in 1469.
How am I supposed to tell this story?
Yeah.
Like it's a mess right now. It's an absolute mess.
Well, you know how you can tell this story. Actually, you could tell this story by writing it. You could tell this story by, even making a movie or a series.
Sure. But who am I, and like who's going to pay for it? So it's really
that's true. That is always a challenge. I spoke recently with by Sukhwinder Singh of Ismad. He did those Sahibzade movies and things. Sundari and Paitaru Singh, and he flat out said the biggest challenge is money.
Yeah.
Because even when people would hug him and cry and thank him and then offer him money, it would fall apart. That's when it came time to actually give a check.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a difficult thing, but it takes somebody that would actually know all of this stuff. You have to understand it and know it. And most of us don't. Even those of us that have read a little bit more than the maybe average Sikh about this history or paid attention to it or whatever, we don't know all the details. We don't know how everything is connected.
Yeah, it's hard. I think there's a lot of people out there who have good intentions and are trying, but the whole picture just isn't presented anywhere nicely to us, really. And I think if somebody tries, and I probably should, I feel like I'm not prepared for all the different types of allegations and backlash you would get from different types of parties is saying you're pushing a very specific narrative.
Yeah.
And so I've been very careful on what I'm doing to try not push a Panthic narrative, whereas, we think only about within this realm. Like, okay, I'm not going to think of it as any particular school of thought. I need to think only in this one. Right. Personally, in my life, I may, practice my Maryada, might be, a specific school of thought. But when Panthically, it's not just with Maryada, it's with the way you look at history and develop institutions. Also, you have to look at those things.
Right.
But we have so much baggage. Like if I told you right now, the All India Gurdwara Act, which essentially gives SGPC whatever, it was written by a Muslim. Yeah. Right? A lot of people say, oh, it was written by a British guy. Like, no, it was actually written by a Muslim MLA from Punjab at the time.
Oh, wow.
Right. So like and I don't think it's bad, but it's even the slight knowledges at all of like, where, who did what? We don't even know who came up with the institutions we're stuck in today. And how do we end up in there? and who likes them.
Yeah. And so what do you feel about the Singh Sabha movement? I mean,
I think a lot of their decisions are critiqued now in retrospect, but they're not critiqued based upon the realities on the ground at the time.
Right. In context of what they were dealing with. Right.
Yeah, what they were dealing with at the time. And I think obviously right now sitting here, I can get really mad about certain things.
Yeah.
But if I go back and try to look at what they were dealing with right then and there, I don't get very upset about a few things.
Yeah. You know, I think I agree with you because, you know, often people criticize the language and I know the language could be fixed. There's a lot of stuff we could fix, but we get caught up on certain details like where it says a Sikh's daughter must marry a Sikh. A lot of people are like, oh, that's sexist. That's chauvinistic. You know, what about the boys or whatever? But in the context of the reality at the time, a Hindu girl marrying a Sikh boy would become a Sikh.
Yeah, it was.
You took on the husband's.
It was religion. The rule of the Hindus at the time. even at least culturally, even today, I know people that have married a Hindu girl who's from a Sikh family, and in their ceremony, which you can argue whether we should even be doing Havans or whatever their ceremony is, but in their ceremony, the Pandit says, you are no longer of this family. You are now a core of the Sikhs.
Really?
I've heard this.
Like, oh, wow.
He's like, you are now this core.
Yeah.
You are nothing else.
Right.
You are theirs now. And I was like, you can argue whether that's chauvinistic too or whatever.
Sure. No,
that's the reality at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's another step to it too. Not only was that the reality of the time that the girl just adopted the boy's religion. So the idea was not to let Sikh girls leave the Sikh religion, to leave Sikhi, right? I mean, so that was why the rule was written. But on the other,
it's not just Hindus though. It's also certain Muslims as well.
Yes.
It's why I guess it's just the South Asia. Well, at least Punjab region, I suppose. I can't speak. I don't know the rest of South Asia, right? But Punjab region, at least even today, you know, we have the cases of ongoing kidnappings of young Sikh girls in Pakistan and you know, in Sindh and stuff.
And the grooming and all that.
It's because if you marry the girl, the law or the culture or whatever, she becomes a Muslim.
Yeah.
Or whatever else.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. And all they were doing was trying to protect our numbers, that we don't lose our numbers.
Yeah.
And if they had just made a statement like a Sikh must marry a Sikh, which is what we all want to say today. But in those days, if you said that, you would have a very small pool to choose from and the Panth wouldn't grow. So when you
can argue that, obviously,
you know, you can think about it in context. Now, maybe it should be changed. Times are different. And we have
I think
issues,
there's a lot of stuff that needs to be changed. But in order for us to make updates, we need a governance structure.
You need a governing structure. You have to have a Sarbat Khalsa.
Sarbat Khalsa. Right? So that goes back to whenever people argue like, oh, there's this issue, there's that issue. I'm like, dude, everything is solved if we have Sarbat Khalsa.
Yeah.
A real one. A proper accountable governance structure for us to work through issues.
So you said you were involved from 2015 to 18 and then then around that time, whatever, you got disheartened. We all kind of saw what happened.
I wasn't disheartened. So
maybe not disheartened. Okay.
I mean, you see the games that are played.
Right. Okay.
Because essentially, it doesn't matter, you know, whether somebody born in the West likes it or not. Sikhs are intrinsically tied to Punjab, regardless of what you believe or think. The concept, I mean, you can argue the concept of homeland or whatever, 80% of our population's in South Asia, 70% in Punjab.
Well, every time we do any kind of training with law enforcement, we always brag about we're the 5th largest religion in the world. Well, that number is coming.
Then you discount the whole populace. But there's an intrinsic tie. Another thing is, you know, really sensitive subject to some people, but it's a fact whether you like it or not. Punjabi is the national language of the Sikhs. If you you know, I'll tell you a story. In 2014, I was backpacking across Punjab by myself. For a couple months, and you know, I was hanging out in the Darbar Sahib, met a Singh from France, met a Singh from Germany, and a Singh from Mumbai, and then there was a Singh local to Amritsar. So the guy from Mumbai, his first language was Marathi, right? Or Marathi, okay. I don't know how to pronounce it, right?
Marathi,
the guy from France, it was French. The guy from Germany was German. Mine was English, but we all spoke Punjabi. That's the only way we communicate with one another.
Right.
Because institutionally, we all learned Punjabi at Gurdwara.
I see.
That's a reality. It's there. you can't ignore it. We learn it. Whether we all spoke kind of broken, but we communicated and we hung out for like 5 days.
Right.
And we were from all over the world.
Right.
So that, by definition, is a tie, a national tie, a language that ties us together. So there's certain realities like that you just gotta accept and learn. I forget where I was going with this. What was? I haven't seen.
Well, no, we were talking about, like, you said you weren't disheartened. You were just kind of.
Oh, I wasn't disheartened, but I saw how things changed, how the focus changed so fast.
Yeah.
Like in 2017, everybody was talking. Sorry, end of 2016, everybody was talking about Sarbat Khalsa. Yeah. It was an ongoing thing. You had the Panch Pyare that quit and essentially became Hawara was Jatadar issuing stuff. You had Tandriwale in the mix too, because he was flexing his bunting muscles at the time. You had so many different players, with Simranjit Singh Mann and Dhyan Singh Mann and all these folks. And, even Biddu said something, right? And he's generally quiet. But the focus got switched to SYL, right? The Satluj Yamuna Canal. And immediately everybody started talking about water.
Right.
And then I was like, what happened? Yeah. We're just going to not talk about this anymore? But like, no, it's done. We're talking about this now. Right. And then thing after thing kept happening. Another thing happened.
Yeah, and more tangents.
And then another thing happened. And then that's a distant past now. And now it's gone.
Right.
And I guess you can say I was disheartened by that. But the fact is, like, that's the reality of what happens.
Yeah, they basically sidelined the most important part of it.
But it wasn't even external forces. It was internal forces.
Right. Okay. I see what
so
you're saying.
we have an internal focus issue or something. We'll start arguing about meat or Dasam Granth or something else, but we'll forget. Like I worked with the Free Akal Takht organization. I was the main content creator for quite some time, and we got a data pool together, the first ever of its kind. We issued a report. We called it Diaspora Polling Brief. So we didn't poll anybody in Punjab. But we held events in Malaysia. We held an event in UK. We held an event in West Coast USA, East Coast USA. And I believe there's one in Canada as well, West Coast Canada. And within those, it was basically a survey. That's what it was. I mean, if you look at it. And what we found was, the survey was based around the role of Panch Pyare, Sarbat Khalsa, the role of the Panth, all that series of questions. You can actually go to the website and look at it. We found that 87% of us agree on everything.
Right.
So
wow, that's a good number to know.
Right. If you think about it. So agreement. So if you look at, I'm saying agree because we did consensus-based, and consensus-based structure was either you agree, you're going to stand aside, but that means you're not going to push back on it. You're kind of like, whatever, this can go through. Disagree is, I disagree with this, but I'm not going to block this from going through. It should still go through. Right. And a block is, I disagree with this. I think it's wrong. I'm going to block this. It needs to be rewritten.
Yeah.
So basically you had 3 chances at agreement and 1 chance at stopping something from going through.
Right.
So the 87% was just, I agree. Not stand aside, not disagree.
So there's more levels of agreement. Yeah.
Yeah. But if I add agreement, stand aside, and disagree, we had a 95% agreement rate on everything.
That's amazing.
So that means, as a people, if we were going to pass bills or laws or whatever you want, I don't like to use those words. If we were going to make decisions,
are you avoiding those words just because they're colonial words? Is that why?
I'm not even going to get into it. And there's just so many. I can say it's for colonial reasons. Another person can say, like, the concept of a binding law created by man is anti-Gurmat or something. I've had so many conversations with so many different
it's interesting. It's interesting.
Right? Yeah, it is very interesting. I just don't have that full perspective, but I appreciate other people's perspectives enough for me to be cautious in the term usage of the word. Okay,
so that's why we're avoiding those words. But coming up with this kind of structure, though, whatever you want to call it.
Right. We had an overwhelming agreement. That means we have an overwhelming ability to get stuff done.
Yeah, you know what? Right. Interestingly enough, when you think about even the definition of a Sikh in the Raat Mrada, Akal Takht Mrada, the idea that you believe in one God, you believe in the 10 gurus, you believe in Guru Granth Sahib as your living guru, you don't follow another religion, and you have faith in Guru Gobind Singh's Amrit. That covers a lot of people.
Yeah, it's pretty open-ended. And if well, yeah, but then, you have to be careful with these terms. It's funny, right? So we were using a lot of the stuff from Ret Mriada, but written differently, just because Ret Mriada, the stigma, like it was written by the British, right? It was written by the British.
Right.
But you use a lot of the concepts, you write it in a completely different way, not using those certain terminology, like belief or the word God, right? Because those things bother people. And I get it.
Well, no, God definitely has like an image associated with the word God, an old man with a big beard or whatever.
Right. So we changed the terminology. And that immediately removed like 90% of the blocks.
Right. It goes back to your survey.
It's saying the same thing. But
no, that's clever.
But essentially, I do know if we had money and there was an entire organization and that was working on this, we could do so much with the Panth. We could accomplish so much.
Well,
we just don't have the people or the resources.
I don't know if that's true. The people and resources are there. We have a lot of people and resources. We're just not channeling that energy in the right way.
Yeah, sure. I mean, but channeling itself is a ability for somebody to do.
Right. True.
And I don't have that ability. And I know some people have tried that you would think have that ability, but they don't as well either.
Yeah.
I think we thought, things were going really well before coronavirus. I mean, Gyani Harpreet Singh, it seemed like some things were happening.
Yeah.
With Harpreet. I mean, to be honest, on the ground, like people don't understand this. Harpreet Singh, people can make comments, whatever they want. Him getting in the position that he is as the SGPC appointed Akal Takhat Jathedar is a result of everything that happened in 2015 to 2016. Okay. He is not one of the status quo people.
Right.
So if you see now, if people who follow news now in the Panth, you'll see there's a voice of Shromani Akali Dal, aka Sukhbir Badal.
Right.
There's a voice of Congress Party with Captain Amrinder. And then there's Jathedar of Akal Takht and SGPC.
Yeah.
Jathedar Akal Takht didn't have a separate voice for a very long time. It was pretty much lock and step with SAD for a very long time. And now Akal Takht Jathedar is saying things that you'll be like, oh my goodness, what? You're saying this?
Yeah.
And then a lot of people have the critique like, well, as soon as Congress, loses next election and Shromani Akali Dal is in power, he won't say anything anymore. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
But he's said enough that it started getting things turning. A lot of conversations were happening and a lot of things were being said where he was facilitating the conversation that I was shocked. Like it totally dismantles the status quo of the conversations that were happening.
Right.
Those are the people that were involved in Punjab and in South Asia, even in like Australia and as far as, Europe and stuff, the conversations. I mean, here too. I mean, I was privy to the conversations. So things were happening.
But Gyani Harpreet Singh is also relatively young.
Yeah, I think he's in his late 30s.
Yeah, he's only relatively young, especially compared to everybody else that we're talking about here.
Yeah, 100%. But also means he's connected to youth issues, I guess you could say. If we classify ourselves as youth in the 30s.
I'm probably not in that category anymore. But
I mean, are you over 40?
I'm 47.
Okay. So by old terminology, by precedent in Sikh history, you're not youth anymore.
Yeah.
But it was 40 and below was deemed youth.
I see. Okay.
And anything above 40 was buddhadal. So that's the precedent.
That's fine. That's still a badass group to be a part of.
Oh, of course. Of course. They just didn't run that fast.
Yeah. And that's true of me too. Okay. So going back to like setting up this structure and getting people on board, and it sounds like it was like so much chaos and just the momentum gets out of control very easily.
Oh yeah, that's exactly what happened. And I was witnessing. This is my first time at the rodeo. Somebody could say,
yeah,
there's people who've been a part of a lot of things. Because these people were there in the 80s, right? They were there in 1992. They were there in 95. They were there in 78. There's people at that table as well. So they had experience. And but what was different was even they were saying the conversations are on a different level right now.
Yeah.
We're talking at a different level right now.
Yeah. So they were even getting inspired by that. The fact that it was,
Yeah. I mean, but the thing is, the fact is that all these people came out of the woodwork.
Yeah.
People were coming out of retirement. People were saying stuff that haven't said anything in a long time.
Right. Well, there was a lot of buzz and excitement about it.
Oh yeah, 100%. So, but the thing is, like, people say it's a cascading effect. This is, they were saying that Ijwana stuff was like one thing, and now it's just keep getting progressively more and more and more. I'm like, okay, but what's going to happen then?
Yeah.
Is it going to happen? We got to the point where we actually started talking about institution development, and that's where we hit the roadblock.
Right.
Because people, like, for instance, so I wrote draft Sarbat Khalsa Vidhi-Vidan, right? You can call it a video the process procedures, right? I submitted it to the Panch Pyare, Satnam Singh Khandewal, right? It got sent to Hawara. Obviously, I wasn't the only drafter. There was a bunch of us, right? There was a bunch on the Free Akal Takhat team, and we had open comments.
Yeah.
We tried to put it online, and we got accusations or you're manipulating or whatever, but we tried to keep it as open as we possibly could using the tools we had, writing what we could.
Yeah, no, I remember.
We were asking everybody. We're like, hey, come on do comments. Hey, you want to write? No? Okay, I guess I'll write. Right. So we submitted, and the kind of comments we got back, people like, I think a small percentage of people actually read through all of it.
Yeah.
And the percentage of people that did, they were like, nobody's ever done this. And it's surprising that you got, I'd say maybe like over 100 contributors, I feel like, in my personal opinion, that I was just like editor for. But, others would be like, hey, this is too hard. Can you make it shorter? Like our governance should be one page and simple for everybody to look at. And that's where I'm sitting there. And that's what really got to me. And these were direct comments, somebody I'm not going to name names.
Yeah, you don't need to.
This is direct comments from very powerful people.
Yeah.
In Punjab politics, at least.
Yeah.
This is too complicated.
And part of that problem, though, is that we all have whatever experience and knowledge we have. We're not in constant training on how to do things like you would be like maybe in a corporate environment where they expect you to be trained as you're going up the corporate ladder. You need training how to be a better manager. You need training to how to manage the managers. We don't really have that for Sikhs in general or Gurdwara or whatever.
But we even got the critique that it was too corporate. That you guys sound like some Western capitalist association.
Yeah, I get that too.
And I was just like,
it's tough.
We're trying to change the terminology as much as we can. And we're literally, the goal is to be as Sikh-minded and develop terminology and institutions in line outside of that scope as much as possible.
Yeah.
But you'd still get that accusation. And it's typically from social media influencers, people who, you ask to contribute and write, and then they don't want to. Like, okay, write, please. Write for us. Yeah. But they don't want to. And I'm not saying that's bad. Maybe I am. I don't know.
It's bad. It is bad, right?
The thing is, I don't know. I can't say it's bad.
No. Okay, you can't, but I can say it because it's just like Singh Sabha movement. They invited people. They invited everybody they could think of that had an opinion about what the Sikh Maryada should be.
Right.
And some people participated a little and then didn't participate later or didn't come.
They left. They're like, no.
They left. And then they're critiquing it later. It's like you had your opportunity to be there and give your input so that it could have been influenced the way you think it should be.
Oh, and then there was like, who should give input? Right. It was right. We dealt with that too. And to be honest, I don't think so. I would be like, it doesn't matter who gives input as long as they can support their input by Gurmat. Right. It doesn't matter what you look like or what your personal practice is. If your ideas are based in Gurmat,
right,
your personal problems and your personal choices, that's your faults and your challenges. But if you're coming up with some idea here, like that I can identify with that is attached to Guru Sahib, why wouldn't I consider that? Why shouldn't we collectively consider that?
Yeah.
I don't think we should ever
measure against Gurmat.
That's the main measurement. And when you're trying to advocate for that, that still doesn't fit well with some people. So like, I remember a critique we got from a pretty famous dude that's actually lost all credibility since something else happened associated with that person. But this person is like a huge, he's a huge diaspora Nihung person.
Okay.
Right. That actually might narrow it down.
It's okay.
But he I remember what he did when we said we're working on trying to write this. He did a whole post to all like thousands of his followers saying like, look, they got money. These are the people that are going to run Akal Takht. I'm like, we're not going to run Akal Takht, first of all. Yeah. Second, we're just trying to facilitate a conversation on our own because nobody else was trying to facilitate an open conversation. And we're trying to invite everybody. And even that, like, there's so many different things you have to do. I was not prepared to deal with those types of things.
Yeah, and if just because somebody's a Monna doesn't mean that they're going to come in and influence it to be like, new Sikh Maryada allows the Beadbi of case.
We weren't even talking about Maryada. That's the thing.
I know, but I'm just saying, like, all you're saying is we want input, and then we'll evaluate it. We'll evaluate the input. Anybody can give good
open
input.
Evaluations. Because at the events, the surveys that we did, the surveys at each one of those events, the survey was in essence evaluate these different proposals.
Right. Okay.
Tell us whether you agree, disagree, stand aside, and block, and then tell us why you would block and why you disagree.
Right.
So we were like, so we can record it. It was the first time that anybody tried to record actual disagreements and blocks. And we said that your blocks had to be supported by Gurmat.
Right.
You can't just say, I don't like this.
Yeah. Right. It just doesn't sit right with me.
Yeah. You couldn't. Yeah. You had to be like, but why? Yeah. And why from some teaching that you can teach all of us, why is this wrong?
Right.
Right. That was the attitude we're getting. Even that was hard to do because people be like, I don't know what Shabad often. I'm asking for you a Shabad. Give me some vichar. Teach me something.
So then you must have had some kind of consolidated like database system and tools, right?
So all the raw data is actually on the website.
That's what I was going to say. Now you have those tools. It was just a matter of getting people to have faith in using these tools.
Yeah.
The tool. Yeah.
It was really hard. You had to do the events, but the events cost money.
Yeah.
And, and it was immense amount of people, resource, and time that it wasn't sustainable. It was a full-time thing. Like I would love to continue doing, surveys type stuff, but the reality is I'm in the world of Maya. I have to pay a mortgage.
You have to pay bills. Yep.
I have parents that I deem as my sangat that I like to take care of. They're retiring. I was essentially their retirement plan. it'd be really messed up, for me not to make sure that they get the medication and the living that they need.
No, absolutely.
There's just no money out there to give me a salary to do this type of thing.
Right. And then if you were to have somebody say, okay, we're creating this organization, we're going to put Charanpreet Singh onto salary to do this work, then you're going to get all the people coming out saying, well, he should be doing this as a seva if he was really doing it.
Sure. Yeah. And then you get critiqued on what your salary is.
Yep.
And I'll be like, well, I was making this much as an engineer.
Right.
That's what I was able to pay for all these things. It's just, there's too many things right now. And I don't know how to navigate them, to be honest.
But still coming back to it, like even at the Gurdwara level, I talked about this recently with somebody, maybe it was another podcast. I don't want to repeat myself too much, but I used to do this workshop at like Windsor Camp. Mm-hmm. Because they had a ton of kids and it went well. It was based off of the Sarbat Khalsa thing that Inderpreet Singh does, where he had, but I totally changed.
I've done that workshop, yeah.
Yeah, but I totally changed it for the purpose of I didn't want anybody thinking about anything Sikhi related. So what I did is I made a puzzle. Mm-hmm. Okay, I put the puzzle on display. You got 150 kids sitting there. You put the puzzle on display and you let them look at it and you say, you guys, we got to figure out the answer to this puzzle. And then we set up our groups. They come evaluate the puzzle. They have to select their jathedar. We go into a room where the Sangat can't see them debating. As a matter of fact, the first time Inderpreet Singh did this, where I was involved when he did this, he did it that way, where he isolated the jathedars who were now going to come to some kind of consensus on what the answer to the problem was that he had. But it doesn't work when people are watching. So that's why I went back to that. They argue, and you put pressure. You guys got to come up with an answer. I know full well they're not going to be able to. After like an hour of them arguing and having the other kids do something else in the meantime, you let them go back to the group, explain what the problems that they ran into, what other people were saying the answer was, and why they were saying that. And sometimes you'd have a group say, hey, we've lost faith in our jathedar. Can we remove our jathedar and send somebody else? We're like, yeah, you can do that. Or sometimes they would be like yelling at their jathedar that, no, you have to convince them. That's got to be the answer because of X, Y, Z. But anyway, what would happen is when they reconvene, now they had consulted with their Sangat. They would reconvene and they would always come to one answer. Because now they took their arguments that they had back to their groups and their groups worked on them, right? So it worked, but my vision of it wasn't really to do this with kids. I think we need to come up with workshops like this and do them at the gurdwaras. Don't talk about any serious issue that the gurdwara is having.
Right, you got to talk about something else.
Talk about something. Give them.
That's interesting. I actually never even thought about that. But that's actually pretty revolutionary.
Well, what happens is then now your brain is working. You figured out how to solve a problem with people that you don't really get along with, maybe. And now maybe you can go into a real problem thinking, hey, that worked. Let's try that process.
100%. Yeah. I mean, 100% these types of training should be happening in Gurdwaras in some way. And I think some organizations have tried to do trainings like this.
Yeah.
I know Jakarta tried to do something with their kids. I think they do this in the workshops for high school students and stuff.
Okay.
You obviously have done it. I think there's other contributors like yourself at other camps that have done it. I know Sikri does it obviously in the Virji and so on.
Yeah.
And they did it with some Gurdwara leaderships. When I was with Free Akal Takht, we did it. Obviously, that's what we were doing essentially.
Yeah. No, it's a brilliant workshop. And the Singh did a great job.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's when the subject matter comes into play, there's just a lot of detractors that you can come up with.
I think that was a problem with Inderpreet Singh's concept because he was doing a Ratmrada change, right? And he gave scenarios and gave people.
The one that I did was Ardas change.
Yeah. Oh, Ardas change. Yeah. So that can be in and of itself controversial.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So that's why I just took that out. I was like, you know what? Don't let people get heated about anything Sikhi related. Let them have fun with it. And then maybe something would come out of it.
Yeah, maybe they get to learn tools on how to think about and approach situations. Maybe
right, and then that's why when you're saying that about your data that you were collecting like that, those are tools that we need to use, and maybe people need the training to understand.
Yeah, I mean it worked. So in the diaspora, you can say this is like a classist type thing. Generally, I'd say it depends on where you are. In Malaysia, they're all very educated. Every single one of them. I'd argue in other parts, it's diverse. It's more diverse. Right. Every single one. So they're not really exposed to organizational type things, in this regard. They don't have experience. They don't have practice. A lot of us, the reality is a lot of us are, we have, small business owners, a lot of us, we're on our own. They're individually self-made people. They're not dependent on anybody. Not many of the first generation people in the diaspora are a part of large organizations in their daily life. But like people in Malaysia, most all of them are.
I see.
They're part of like Teach for Malaysia, those types of organizations, big companies, like so on and so forth. They have business empires that they've built over generations of them being there. It's just not the case everywhere else. And in Punjab, it's even more so an issue. Because there's such a huge range in education and approach to situations that you have to deal with, which is why we didn't go to Punjab. But so like Harinder Singh, he did a presentation to Samvad, right, which is the I guess you can say the intellectual kind of body of people that get together and do presentations every so often.
Yeah.
And it's based out of Ludhiana. I did a presentation to them that we can consult on our experience doing this. But we believe that this needs to be done in Punjab, but we don't have the resources, tools, or capability or expertise to conduct this in Punjab.
Okay.
You guys have to do it.
Yeah.
And a lot of people ask questions. They're like, okay, so how did you do this? But essentially then nothing came of it because something else happened. And we're just talking about that thing.
Right.
That's the people are there. But I think it'll happen because, like I said, before COVID, these conversations were happening. At the Akal Takht level.
There is progress. It wasn't as impactful as you were hoping. It's
not overt. It's not overt at all. And nothing really ever is. That's the unfortunate thing about the Panth is like a lot, you're either in the know or you're not.
Yeah.
So I'm not directly tied to people, but I know the people that are, and they know that I exist and I want to help. and there's thousands and thousands of me doing this. You know, they're all over the place. I can tell you about another guy named, actually, I don't want to say his name. He's in Australia, another guy in Germany, and then another guy in Malaysia that all drafted things.
I see.
You know, they between bylaws or, you know, Svidivadan or whatever.
Yeah.
But the point is like, why can't we pay for all of us to get together and draft something and, you know, fight each other about how to write something? Like, we don't have the resources or financials to do that type of thing. But just to backtrack, another opposition or thing that Sikhs would get caught up on is implementation. And I would say is like, it was like, impossible.
What's an example? What?
If they were like, you're developing all these processes, how are we going to apply it?
Yeah.
How are we going to implement all of it? I'm like, it doesn't matter. Let's develop the process first.
Yeah, you're saying that they were getting stuck on that question.
Yeah, and then they're like, well, there's no point in doing any of this if we're not going to, you know, have an implementation plan. And then I would try to make the argument that, look, Anandpur Sahib resolution was written in the 60s. We didn't start Dharm Yodh Morcha until 1982 with Baba Janel Singh.
Right.
That's when they actually started agitating for its implementation.
Right.
So like we need, the thing is like these sparks, these things, these movements, lehers happen randomly. You can't even guess. It just happens.
Right.
We're never prepared for it. And you expect, like even Sarbat Khalsa in 2015, it just happened because Simranjeet Singh Mann and them announced that they were going to do Sarbat Khalsa. And everybody was like, oh, somebody used the word Sarbat Khalsa. And then everybody got excited. And then real conversations started happening that really Simranjeet Singh Mann and his weren't prepared for those conversations happening. And so when we came with our academic approach and intellectual approach saying we got to develop a governmental process, they're like,
whoa, what?
No. We're just trying to win the election. So there's all sorts of stuff like that happening all the time, you know?
Yeah.
And so implementation was the thing people got caught up on. Another thing is why aren't you just talking about Khalistan? I'm like, well, we're talking about setting up a governance structure that can exist whether we have a state or not.
Right.
And then they were like, wow, that's stupid. You know, I've gotten insults to saying that you're a traitor to the Panth, you're a traitor to the Khalsa, you're a traitor to the Shaheeds because you're not just saying Khalistan. But in actuality, you know, like we're trying to develop a governmental system that we can exist in a world where maybe nation states don't exist anymore.
And not only that, like I think a lot of Panthic-minded people, they're for the spirit of a Khalistan. But how are you going to define what it is?
Yeah, so if we're trying to make a governmental structure, obviously if you make one that exists beyond any statehood or region, it can easily be implemented when and if a state I think it's a separate thing completely. And people are going, no, it's not. Yeah. You're just diluting. Yeah. And I'll be like, we're not. Like in essence, like, okay, I put this thought. So I was only able to just to quiet one person up about this who was really loud. Everybody else just, you know, kept calling us names and saying we were whatever we were. One person, I said to him, I was like, look, I gave two arguments to them. I said, what about when Earth becomes inhabitable because of immense pollution by human beings and we have to settle on another planet?
Right. Oh my God. Hang on. I can't believe you're just saying this. I'm going to pause you right there for a second. For years, I've been developing this in my head. I've been a workshop called A Sikh Mission to Mars. That we have to, all of us are going to be going to Mars and everything is up for grabs again. And then go through this workshop, exactly that, and that the Earth has become uninhabitable and we have to go. And now we have an opportunity, you know, kind of recreating 47 and, you know, whatever. But sorry, you said that and I was like, oh my God. I
would love to explore this topic way more than you. The way it came to me was, it was actually an episode of Deep Space Nine.
Oh my God, I love Deep Space Nine.
I love Deep Space Nine. That is the best.
It was the best because they covered everything. They covered the politics. They covered the
Bajorans and the I just said Kardashians. I mean Cardassians.
Cardassians, yeah.
The Cardassians. Everything. It was also an episode on Star Trek: The Next Generation where there was a planet of a specific tribe of Native Americans that they were given by the United Federation of Planets because they lost their homeland. They're like, we waited 1,000 years for this. And then the concept was like a star was about to supernova.
Yeah.
And the planet was going to be destroyed. They're like, you're trying to move us again? Like, and that was like a whole thing. But that's where that idea came to my head. And I think maybe he thought I was crazy and he just stopped talking to me because I put these scenarios out there.
No, that's a real scenario. We live in a world where that is possible.
Right. Yeah, it is. It's 100% possible.
Well, what was the second point you made? Because I interrupted you when you said that.
The second point.
First one was that.
The first one was resettlement.
Yeah.
The second point was this. I was like, if you have done the study and research, and we have developed a governance structure, a decision-making structure that says only decisions that can ever pass are based on Gurmat, and based on Gurmat, Sikh Itihas, through the lens of Gurmat, even evaluate. Just because it happened in history doesn't matter. It matters what we make sense of Gurmat, whether it was a good thing that it happened or not.
Right.
If you believe it's a Gurmat thing, and there's a decision-making structure that all Sikhs are accountable to that exists beyond a state, and you put forth a resolution proposal for statehood, and you think it's Gurmat, and the decisions will not be made unless it's Gurmat, don't you think Khalistan will be made automatically?
Yeah, exactly.
But if you don't have faith or confidence in the Gurmat behind the Khalistan idea or statehood, I think I think it's bad branding, to be honest. But anyway, statehood, then you shouldn't be scared of this at all. If you do, I'm not scared of it. Right? I want decisions to be, even if my own belief structure, or if I believe that, obviously it is. But if somebody can teach me that it's not through Gurmat-based decision making, why wouldn't I want to learn?
Right.
Why wouldn't I? I know it's not going to happen because there's just no way. Right. But if it could, this is where it could happen. This is where it could happen, where I could learn something. I want to learn something. I want Sikhs to have a perspective on everything. I want us to be able to critically make decisions on Gurmat on a global level. And that's the ultimate Sangat.
Yeah.
How else are we supposed to be what we're supposed to be if we can't have those dialogues and have a structure based on figuring out what the Gurmat thing to do at this particular time is?
And the world is smaller now than it's ever been.
Yeah, with technology, it's immense.
Yeah, we have the opportunities. I mean, the issue is that we're not thinking about this stuff. We're all caught up in our own lives. We're busy making money, trying to pay our bills or get ahead, or
we're caught up in trauma. Like a lot of us are. It's a fact, and we're not dealing with that properly as well. And that may be a reason why we can't progress, because we're not dealing with it as well.
That's an interesting point. Yeah. But fascinating. I mean, I think when we start to think about how we can get people to start not implementing, that's not the right word, but looking into what are the different perspectives, what are the tools that are available, how can we use them together, then you will see the next step. Then you'll see the people that be like, they'll stop questioning what's the implementation process, and they'll start saying, hey, I have an idea on how to implement this. Right? But it's going to take that initial getting everybody together, getting them having these discussions, even the debates. Fine, you're angry about this, something I did before. Let's have the debate, or let the Sangat, give you feedback and be open to it. Right?
Absolutely.
Very interesting. So you haven't really given up on that idea. You weren't disheartened in that sense. You were just kind of, the whole thing got sidetracked. But you're saying that the fruit of that is still kind of fallen. There's still movement in that direction.
I mean, there's definitely conversations that have happened. I think they're intermittent and they're not as consistent as you would want it to be because of so many more distractions.
Right.
But it's 100% not in the public sphere at all.
Right.
It's not, which sucks.
Yeah.
But I mean, none of us were trained in capitalizing on a viral movement of the sort.
Yeah.
It was new to us. I mean, we made a Facebook page that got like 50,000 followers in like 4 days.
Yeah, in no time.
This was happening. And then we're like, now what? And now it's just sitting there and nobody ever does anything with it. We haven't done anything with it in 5 years.
Yeah.
To be honest, nobody even knows who's in charge of it anymore.
Oh, wow.
So it's like, what are we supposed to do?
So what are you working on now? What do you do? What projects are you on?
Mainly I just focus on Logar. That's it. I just do that. And
explain to people about Logard.
So Logard is in essence, a toy company based. Our mission statement is to learn Sikh heritage in a way that's never been done before. So it's myself and Puneet Singh, which you know.
Yeah.
He was in Michigan for a long time, but now he's moved. Him and I started this up, and essentially, I wanted to design things that were, try to implement my career into Sikhi in some sense.
Yeah.
I knew the big level things I couldn't do. Like, I don't have the resources or path or opportunities to, work on, trying to make a better well or something for some band in Punjab.
Yeah.
To be honest, I don't think any work is needed there. We have a totally different water issue. But so I was like, I like toys. I never had any Sikh toys when I was little. What can I do? And then I started designing Lego kits, essentially is what it was. But I also wanted to challenge the perceptions of things. So typically people would start with making a Darbar Sahib or Harmandir Sahib, some people like to call it.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm not doing that. No way. I'm not doing commodity. I want to talk about things that people don't really think about. So the first thing I made was a Akal Takhat Sahib out of Legos.
Yeah.
Right. So I made
and the interesting thing there too was you made different levels of it, right? Like there's a basic and intermediate and then the advanced, which is, how many pieces is your advanced Akal Takhat?
It was like 2,500 or something.
Yeah. That's awesome.
A bunch of people got it. Only 2 people were able to finish building it. So we kind of discontinued it. We don't do it anymore. The little ones sell a lot though. The little ones.
Well, I think there's still a thing that we think of it as kids' toys. And this is something I was talking about Sukhwinder saying about his movies. They're just kids' movies. And we gotta stop thinking that way, right?
Yeah.
Here's a principle. Like, first of all, you get to express yourself creatively.
Yeah, it's because I can't draw or anything. This is the only thing I could do. So it's like I started making Lego sets.
Yeah.
So
now, are you venturing outside of Legos? Like, because when you say that, I think of like when we were kids, you play with Star Wars action figures, superhero action figures, and different toys. Is there a direction?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay.
We just didn't have enough resources, but now, the time is coming. We've identified particular artists that we want to work with, that we want to support. And the idea is like, so I could have gotten anybody. I could have paid somebody, some modeler, freelancer.com, whatever. But I wanted to support I think this is okay. Some people argue that this is, discriminatory. I wanted to support an Amritari artist.
Right.
That was in Punjab, that came from a family that they're trying to support.
Okay.
And I found one guy.
Wow.
He was an exceptional sculptor.
Yeah.
Exceptional.
That's
awesome. He didn't have time for so long. But now he has time. And so he's open. Now he's doing all sorts of work. And I'm really happy for him because he can support. He's from a family that had been making large Punjabi doors. Like the big 8-10 foot ones.
Yeah.
Since the empire.
I see. It's like decorative and stuff. And,
yeah. So his family was doing that.
Oh, wow.
And he was the first one. So they're all artists, but they've been making these awesome doors and wooden sculptures, furniture stuff for so long.
Wow.
Like Manjian stuff or like Maharaj.
Yeah.
They were making doors for local gurdwaras, itihasa gurdwaras for so long. They're not appreciated or they have no patronage. And so we were like, we want to be patrons towards somebody specifically.
And the FUBU, for us, by us mentality, there's something to that. Even Sukhwinder Virji talked about that when he had voice actors. They interviewed actual actors and he would look at them and be like, you don't embody any of the qualities of these characters. Yeah. And he felt like, I don't want you to do this voice. So he would find Gursikh personalities and ask them to do, help music, help with the voices.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot of improvement that could be done there. But again, he had the same problem. It's a money issue, resources.
Yeah, and also like logistically trying to make it work is also challenging.
Yeah.
Trying to arrange, we're trying to do WhatsApp calls with people. It just wasn't working, especially with, everything runs differently in South Asia, in India and Pakistan, whatever you want. Their timings are different. You have to consistently bother. And if you don't, something doesn't get done. So learning the cultural aspects of getting work done is something that we're still figuring out, to be honest. But we have a goal in mind. We do want to get into figures making. We have several concepts, so it is in the works. But in the meantime, we're still doing Lego sets. We've done a Harmandir Sahib, a large Harmandir Sahib or Darbar Sahib, but we did a twist to it. Instead of yellow bricks to represent gold, we did tan bricks.
The original.
Yeah. So people are like, why is this muddy Darbar Sahib? We're like, well, that's what it used to look
like. Right.
Before we became obsessed with marble and gold. So like, I don't want to, I'm not making money from this. I mean, it's all about trying to challenge things and give kids what we didn't have, and families too, Look, I'm a huge Lego fan, dude. I have a room full of Lego sets. I paid $900 for that giant Millennium Falcon that I built. It took me 30 hours. It was my gift for myself 2 years ago. I bought it, and everybody's like, "Oh, it took up the entire coffee table." It's still sitting there.
That's awesome.
But, so I do all that. It's fine. So I still enjoy it. I mean, I've gotten messages where people are like, "Oh, I wish I had these when I was a kid." I was like, "Why'd you get them now? I play with them."
Yeah.
And then
and that's the thing. We're not thinking about it the right way either. Honestly, the Hollywood and all these movies and the comic books, I love all that stuff too.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But it is brainwashing you, right? I'm using the word brainwashing, but it's programming you to a certain thing. And if you have things that are related to your own history, Sikhi related, Gurmat based, that's also programming you. So now you're interacting with those things in your childhood when your brain is still developing, and you're making those connections deeper.
Right.
And then when you see, like, even now, if I see a guy, Superman, dressed like Superman and it looks like Superman, you get a little excited. Hey, that's Superman.
Yeah.
Can you imagine you have these little Khalsa figures that you've been playing battles, redoing Battle of Chamkor and, whatever. And then you see somebody that looks like that at the Gurdwara. You feel that pride, you feel that connection.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So that's where go ahead.
Yeah, we have superheroes ourselves within our own nation. Like, these are real people.
Yeah.
These are people that were literally cut to pieces.
Wow. Yeah.
But didn't stop what they were doing. So that's real.
Yeah.
This isn't a fantasy. And so, that is a huge motivation when you think about it. But aside from that, so we've continued, we do wood stuff now. We made a wooden panty board type thing. So we have a CNC router. My father, Charanpreet Singh, he does all the machining and stuff. So I do all the design work. He does the machining.
Okay.
We're
designing everything on the computer, and then the machine just kind of carves it out, right?
Not necessarily. It's not a plug and play type thing. You have to program how the tool moves and the speed of the tool and all that.
And that's what your father knows how to do.
Yeah, he's the machinist there. Right, I can do it as well, but he has 30 years of experience. Right?
Okay.
So he's like the expert. I'm like a novice, or not even like a beginner.
I see.
So we have a good, and that he's retiring soon, and so our idea is that he's going to be doing this in his retirement, just fabricating all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
Like, he's obsessed with clocks now. So he wants to make like Punjabi number clocks and all that stuff. So we're getting into all that stuff, but we want to get into, like, there's endless possibilities for us to do. We already actually did this, and somebody might steal the idea, which I don't care, to be honest. Cause the idea is, that's the thing is, I don't care whoever steals my idea. I just care that it's getting made. So it's available.
Right.
If I can do it cheaper than somebody because I think your prices are outrageous, I'll just sell it for cheaper.
Yeah.
But if you're selling it for a fair price, I'll be like, all right, yeah, you do your thing. I'm not going to do it.
Right.
So that's why I don't care if people steal anything. But we started making. So we went into Google's. They have terrain data for everywhere in the world.
Yeah.
So I extrapolated the terrain data for Punjab itself, and basically created a embossed thing that we machined out of wood of the map of Punjab.
Wow, that's cool.
So we extracted it like that. And I know somebody else is trying to do it too right now. We did it like 3 years ago, but then we started doing the panty board instead.
Yeah.
But that person's working on it right now. And I'm like, go, power to you, go for it. But I'll still do it if he does it too expensive. So,
and, when you were saying that, my brain kind of went on a tangent a little. I was thinking about, like, can you imagine if you carved out like the hills of Anandpur Sahib or something, and where you could play with your little action figures.
100%. That's what do you think I'm trying to do here?
Oh my God.
That would be, play.
Yeah, that would be so cool. And then you could just go a step further. You could create, a Sikh Dungeons and Dragons type role playing.
Absolutely.
Game. Absolutely. Like there's so many possibilities.
Yeah. You can hire people to write stories and stuff. And they play out stories of, okay, like you have to, there's some story where you have to get the Nagini for Bachittar Singh to the Logar Fort in time. So in like 10 turns, you have to navigate all these obstacles.
Like, oh man, that's a really great idea.
And get there before everything. And you can kind of like tell side stories, fiction side stories for all these real stories in our history, just so people can engage with it in a fun way. I want to do all these things. At the end of the day, is resources, time, and people.
Yep.
It's hard.
Well, here, do this. Email me the website and whatever contact information, if you have like social media special set up for any of this stuff.
For sure.
Because that way, if we can start to get the word out, I mean, I know you've already done this for a while. You probably got a lot more exposure than I'm going to be able to get you, but still, there's a lot of people that don't know.
All exposure is good exposure. Yeah, exactly. A lot of people don't know.
Yeah,
we're not good at, I'm not a businessman. I'm an engineer and I'm Amritari, right? So it's like I don't have that skill set. I can build and design things all day long.
Okay, so that's what you're working on, the Legos and the action figures, and it got a couple of things coming down the road.
I mean, from a Panth access, there's things going on too, but there's nothing really fruitful. It's just dreams right now or aspirations.
The dreams are good though, man. People need to hear the dreams.
Okay, so here's the dream. Essentially, is there needs to be Sikh thought development.
Yeah.
And there needs to be an organization based on it.
Like a Sikh think tank.
A think tank, you can call it. That's really it.
I've been doing that. Everybody I call, I tell them everything I think.
Yeah, but there needs to be the organization that actually sits there and, right. So like, for instance, like we got, I actually, to be honest, I didn't really agree with all the branding for Free Akal Takht or the process right up front. We need to just gather the people who are willing to work only and not worry about the community at first.
Yeah.
And do a ton of work. And then after the work is done, after we've peer reviewed it internally with all these minds, then you put it out there for the community again.
Well, I'll tell you that Kuldeep Uncle kind of did that with the retreat in 95. He had handpicked like about 100 people from across the country in Canada to come to that retreat. That was the first retreat. Like most of the time you just went to camp, and then when you were 18, you graduated from camp and then you went on with your life or whatever.
Yeah.
And the idea was he wanted to say, I want the college kids and the young professionals that he thought were the leaders, but they're not connected. We weren't connected together. And, everybody was there. Gurmeet Singh was there. Harinder was there. Sinet started from that retreat.
Mm-hmm.
And we all a ton of us just met there, and then big things happened out of there. But it took, everybody getting together, and they started working. They were mostly Amritari people. They might have all been Amritari people. I don't remember for sure. But, they were all Panthic minded. There was no having to stop a workshop and explain why keeping your hair is important or something.
Oh my goodness. That was a huge challenge for us. So it's like, who said the Panth was Guru? I'm like, what are you talking about? Who said the Panth was Guru? I don't want to talk about this right now.
Yeah, and we got bigger and better things to deal with.
Like, are you serious? Like, come on.
No, that happens. But, one thing that I had thought about, and this is where when you started talking about it, I jumped right to the think tank. I had thought about this database where it's a hand-selected group of people from around the world, intellectuals or Panthic-minded people contribute. And almost like Quora or something else where you post an issue and then everybody can respond with their evidence, Gurmat-based or history-based evidence of why they think, one way or another. And all the research can be compiled there as evidence, and then you're just kind of tracking each issue like that, and they can vote one way or the other and collectively which answer they think is right. But, like the idea was though, they don't all have to know who each other are either. Now there's obviously going to be some people who help pick the people, or maybe they nominate people and then there's a internal review and they're added to the board. But you'd want people on all sides of all the issues giving their best evidence so that it can be either accepted or countered.
Yeah, it's creating the criteria for the people, the minimum understanding.
Yeah,
it gets really in depth, really fast, and really complex. You can gather a bunch of smart people.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, okay, like I think it was before Mandheer Singh won the election, right? Before Congress Party won. Yeah. I actually got in an argument with Captain Amrinder, the current Chief Minister of Punjab, on the Sikh Military History Forum on Facebook.
Okay.
And basically, it was somebody posted a picture of the Fulkiyan, Baba Ala Singh, right?
Okay.
He was the first Misaldar of the Fulkiyan. and they're essentially the ones who committed treason.
Yeah.
Right? And they sided with Ahmad Shah Abdali when the rest of the Sikhs were, the genocide happened upon them, and they're the ones who didn't join the empire because they're like, oh, Ranjit Singh, blah 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 blah. Yeah. But they ended up siding with the British.
Yeah,
they're the ones that
we're feeding them information, and
they're the ones who killed thousands of Nihungs at Dukniwan and Saab and Patiala when Nihungs were about to do a guerrilla military war against the British. They basically derailed any chance of Sikhs keeping sovereignty.
Yeah.
And then later on, Congress Party supports Indira Gandhi, and they all joined the Congress Party.
You connected it all back.
Right? That's why I connected it all together, right? So you go to them, and I've talked to him, and he was saying, "Oh, it was the politics of the time." That's what he sounded like.
No.
I was like, "You, the Fulkiya went against the rest of the Khalsa."
Right.
There is a map. There is a map that a French map maker, I believe, he was a French, right? He was a very famous map maker, was sent by the British to map all of South Asia.
Yeah.
And I'd argue this is where the term Sikhs come from, and India, as a whole, because they made a map of India, which is all of South Asia.
Yeah, they just kind of grouped them all together and said, hey, this is India now.
And so and the missiles were Confederacy, right?
Yeah.
They independently ran. They had different areas of influence. So, the Satluj River, south of that is the Fulkiya missile, right? They're called the Patiala, Nabha, Jind, Kaithal, all these different states, Malerkotla, right? All these different, they're the ones who became Pepsu. So anything south of Satluj, anything north of Satluj to the
Wait,
Indus
real quick,
River,
explain what Pepsu is. So
it's Punjab, it was a state that was formed during British Raj, which had all the Sikh principalities, all the Sikh kingdoms.
Yeah, that weren't they kind of just grouped them together and then gave it a name.
But that was everybody except the Ranjit Singh and the Sikh Empire with the Akal Takht and Akali Fulla Singh and Hari Singh Nalwa. So that was the actual Sikh Empire.
Yeah.
And these are all the people who wanted power for themselves, who sided with the British, and they were able to retain their wealth and everything.
Right.
That was Pepsu.
Yeah.
So anything south of the Satluj is them, right? So I call them the traitors.
Yeah.
I always mess with my wife because she's from Ropar. And I'm like, you're from the traitor side.
You're from the traitors.
But anyway, so
you haven't been married long enough then.
It's been 5 years. It's good enough. Anyway, so above that, right? I totally forgot what my point was here.
Oh no, you were saying you were talking about how, gosh, it kind of slipped in my mind too.
Well, they were essentially aligned with the British, and they were against everything that the Sikhs was. Oh, here, the map.
Yeah, the map. Yeah.
The map. Okay, so the French guy made the map that was hired by the British. So he asked everybody in the regions of whose Raj is this? Who's the governor or the ruler of this land?
I see.
So all 11 of the Sikh missiles from the Satluj all the way to the Indus, actually all the way to Khyber Pass, I'd argue, they all said this is Sikh Raj. None of them said their own name.
I see.
None of them. But south of the Satluj, they all said their own name.
Their own name.
Right? So on the map, between Satluj and all the way up to the Khyber Pass, all the way to Rajasthan, to Jaisalmer, all the way there. So that's an immense piece of land. It says on that map, this is during this, it says country of the Sikhs.
Wow.
This is the oldest map of South Asia.
Wow.
So during missile period, Sikh influence was from Kashmir to Jaisalmer.
Wow.
That was where Sikhs were ruling during missile period.
Yeah.
That's immense. That's the size of Mexico.
Right.
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 Mexico is humongous.
Yeah.
Right. That's the entire west coast of the United States.
Yeah.
And now Punjab is the size of Maryland.
Right.
So, but the point is
and
the
even
mindset.
Even the more important, amazing thing is we know the countries today. We know about Afghanistan and Pakistan and all these areas. We know that
Pakistan was Sikh Raj.
Yeah. All of that was right.
Yeah, all of it. Yeah. So
crazy.
But the point is I'm not talking about land grab or whatever. I'm talking about mentality.
The mentality, right? They were united.
So that the people who have the mentality of I'm not going to say Sikh Raj, they exist to this day, and they're rampant. So when I argue with something like Captain Aminder or whatever on Facebook or whatever a long time ago, Facebook's a bigger deal in India than it is in diaspora.
I see.
It's like everything for them. They talk and all that stuff happens there. Like they even arrest people based on what they like on Facebook. Wow. But he was basically saying, you know, the general idea is that, you know, Guru Gobind Singh Ji, or I forget what, I think it was Guru Gobind Singh Ji, said the sons of fool would be Rajas and rule their whole lives or something. Yeah. And they've taken that to this day. And so for them, you know, the Dal Khalsa or Tat Khalsa or whatever, you know, so the Sarbat is because they claim back to Guru Gobind Singh Ji said that they can rule on their own. Yeah. And so it's a thing. So what I'm saying is when you're selecting people for a think tank or whatever, you have to understand that there's these people with a very specific perspective like this. Yeah. And it's actually the antithesis of everything. Right. So there's fundamentals that need to be accepted and it's like, how do you figure out what those fundamentals are?
No, you do that. One person becomes two people, and those two people are, you know, they know who they are. They work together. They understand each other, and then they become four people. Yeah. Until, you know, it has to be that way. It can't be an open thing where anybody who thinks they know anything come apply. Yeah. It has to be tight.
See, I would argue. I mean, I could name probably 50 people right now. Right. But who's going to unite them? Who's going to contact? Who's going to do the resources and time to get them all together and get them to use vacation days or whatever? And where would you do it?
You're absolutely right. But that's why it has to be a platform. So we need to be putting some effort into a platform. I even thought about that for just understanding Guru Granth Sahib. Like we have different interpretations. They should all be available to us. You know, like I should be able to click on a shabad. I should be able to click on a line. I should be able to click on a word, and I should be able to get the variations of interpretations. Right. And then, you know, just so that our information is there, and then we can study more and we can learn more and we can figure out why is this interpretation this way and why is this interpretation that way. You can do that, you know, with Gurbani, you can do that with politics, you can do that with, I mean, even a Sikh think tank. One of the examples I've used when I was talking to one of my buddies about this was, and he thought I was crazy, but I was like, you got to think about this. What are we going to do in the United States if a Sikh does some high profile crime or some kind of high profile act of violence? What is the Sikh response to a Sikh who may have done something like that that's getting a lot of media attention? Nobody's even prepared. Well, I think they are now. Sikh Coalition and a couple others, they are thinking this way and starting to prepare for worst case scenario type things. But we don't think about what is our response. If something happens in the world, some atrocity, some kind of, you know, Holocaust or these kinds of things. What is the collective Sikh response to that? You know, maybe we can't get a world Sikh response, but maybe we can get an American Sikh response. Maybe we can get a Canadian Sikh response. You know, I don't know. But we're not even thinking of that. All we think about is the organization we belong to, or the Gurdwara we belong to, or the particular group that we belong to, and are we perpetuating those ideas?
Right. Yeah, 100%. You know, there's a lot of challenges to how we organize and how we deliberate. But essentially, what you're saying, I agree with. We need a platform, and that's what I argued about for so long. I just don't know. I mean, I've created the processes, where it exists, and how it gets implemented is the issue. But essentially, we haven't had time to actually fully flesh out the processes. Yeah, which I think is the number one important thing. You know, but you know, it's time and resources.
Look, I think we've already solved all the Panth's problems today.
Yeah, 100%. It's done. Yeah. Right, we're going to put that up now.
There's not much more to say. No, we've been going for a while here, and I don't want to take up too much of your time either. But I really, really appreciate you coming on Nihung's Arena and talking about the things you talk about. People need to know that people are talking about these things. People are thinking about these things. Actions, you know, things are happening, and I want to make sure that we connect, you know, in a way that people can be motivated and inspired to do more themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I appreciate you having me over. It was fun.
Yeah, no, it was a lot of fun for me too. Charanpreet Singh, thank you very much. Okay. Talk to you soon.
Okay. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.